And for those of you who want to write a book, I want you to hear what the wonderful editor, Joanne Davis, said to me when I said to her, Joanne, why do you want me to write? I'd already written How to Work Room. I'd already written The Secrets of Savvy Networking, her idea. I said, why do you want me to write a conversation book? There are 21 books on this subject. And she looked me in the eye, because she's only 5'1", and said, because none of the others have your voice.
You are now listening to the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, the Going North podcast. I'm your host, best-selling author of the book Stay the Course, and Maxwell Leadership Certified Team Member, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be getting some tips and techniques to advance yourself up next. Today's episode shout out before the episode starts goes to my good buddy Nick Deplich, a fellow bread warmer, baby. That's right indeed. Thanks, my man, for copping some gear from the merchandise shop. The green version of the t-shirt, Advance Others to Advance Yourself. And we got some more gear on the wonderful website as well to check out later. But my goodness, Nick, thank you so much for copping some gear. Gonna give you a shout out on this episode doubly because he's got this wonderful fundraiser called Extra Life 2022 where he's looking to raise at least $3,000 for the Children's Miracle Network hospitals this year, because he reached his goal last year and was able to get the most last year. I believe it was like $1,592 out of $1,000 goal, where he basically plays games for 24 hours straight on his birthday every November just to raise money for some kids while having fun playing video games. So if you'd like to contribute to that fundraiser, I'm going to put the link in the show notes in this episode, so that way you can contribute if you like to do so, because you got about 170 days at the time of this episode dropping till the fundraiser ends. So let's see if we can double that goal to 6,000. Even the goal is 3,000. Now let's get on with the show. Thanks again, Nick, and keep being super special awesome, my brother. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as the Going North podcast, where we bring you some super special, awesome humans from across the globe who have put pen to paper and joined the business of immortality known as authorship. We got another wonderful guest for you today, folks, because my goodness, like, it's kind of amazing. Like, one day, folks like me who work in a library, have a day job, we're shelving books. The next thing you know, you're talking to the person behind the book the next day, because my goodness, today's guest in particular, in these interesting times that we're in, like in-person events and meetings, they're coming back, folks. But the thing is, we're kind of rusty, if not all the way rusty. And the thing is, you can't leverage contacts you don't have, y'all. So being able to meet, mingle, and connect and engage with wonderful folks and be able to work a room, like, that is the way to build your network and the relationships that build them, folks, especially when it involves that safety net of support. And the thing is, with Zoom, it's a whole different ball game, especially when it comes for business and social events and feeling uncomfortable. Well, don't worry, folks. We got you covered like 5 blankets in the wintertime, folks, because today's guest is a legend, y'all. A legend herself, because she has written a classic bestseller that has sold over 1 million copies in 14 countries. She's been named by Forbes.com as one of the networking experts to follow, and she's a best-selling author and an in-demand international keynote speaker that's been on a boatload of platforms, just name a few: Men's Health, CN, Financial Times, USA Today, and has helped many wonderful organizations, including the U.S. Air Force, United Health Group, Yale University, and many more. So let's give it up for the skilled and radiant. Let's give it up for the one and only Mingling Maven, Susan RoAne. How you doing today, Susan?
Oh, I love the word radiant. I think I'm going to borrow it and call myself Radiant RoAne. Or Radioactive RoAne, I'm not sure. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Well, hey, I guess Radioactive, you exploded into the wonderful world and became a superstar in your hometown by folks finally inquiring about your wonderful knowledge decades ago, and voila, here you are.
That is it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, indeed. Yes, ma'am, indeed. So, my goodness, as with all introductions, they're not allowed to be 57 years long, and I'm pretty sure I forgot a whole boatload of things, and I'm pretty sure there was a quick backstory that wasn't even mentioned before you got to where you are today. So, my feeling is in on a bit about who is the skilled
Yeah.
Susan.
Well, first of all, though, I live in the San Francisco area. I'm a born and bred Chicagoan. And so that pretty much means that deep dish pizza, you can't be for both baseball teams. You can only be for one. And I am a city girl, which means that I rode the L, and that makes me very, very different. But there's something else. I taught school in Chicago. I'm a Midwestern person, and I like to think that those of us who come from the Midwest have our feet firmly planted on the ground. And we're the kind of people that if you give us a task, we get it done. And I'm also a former teacher. So my friends who were also teachers and I think if you give us a task, it's homework. And so we have to do it. So I credit, I think, my Midwest upbringing, but I also being from Chicago have that Chicago kind of style. So I tell people, oh, I'm so affable and fun, but don't cross the line because I grew up in a town that we had a big lake and we bought you cement shoes. So I scare people.
Uh, yes, indeed. And she's 11'4" with all that confidence. It's in reverse, y'all. She's
I
11'4".
hide it. But Dom, I act like I'm 11'4", and the truth is I'm 4'11".
That's the
But
beautiful thing about technology.
that's right. I had someone back in the days when we actually talked to each other on this thing that maybe people don't know, but we could tell you it's called a telephone. I had clients that would say they would meet me when I'd come to give a speech that they hired me to give, and they went, "Oh my God, you sound 6 feet tall." And so that's something I'd like to say to everyone listening. Don't worry about your size. Sound big. Someone once told me this, that especially for little females, take up the room. Don't make yourself smaller. So I'll sit on an airplane going, there's not enough leg room. And the guy next to me who's 6'6" going, what are you talking about? But take up your room and put the energy in your voice. Because that's sometimes the first introduction to people, especially now when we're not seeing them. No one on Zoom knows how tall I am. I'm sitting on like a 3-inch pillow. You know, someone once told me I should be driving with a booster seat in my car. Oh, that's a good advice. I don't think I asked you for it. Which now I'm going to segue and say, one other very important trait about people who are savvy networkers, they don't give unsolicited advice. Because here's the RoAne line. I wrote an article about it. The article I wrote was Fed Up with Feedback, or Who Asked You Anyway? But yes, that was my subtitle, was out of my Midwest background. But feedback's important. And so what I want to say to people is, if you're invited to an event, if there is something you're worried about, if you have a network of people in place whom you trust, and they may not all be business pals, they could be your high school pals, your grammar school pals, your former neighbors, someone you used to work with, you need to have what we call the kitchen cabinet. The people that you can sit around the kitchen, have a beer or a soda or whatever, and run ideas by to hear what they think. And those are the people that you solicit for their feedback. The other people that give you unsolicited feedback, I've never heard unsolicited feedback that I ever liked. Oh, I
So
know. Here's
true.
the line I've used. If unsolicited feedback were so valuable, when was the last time you listened to your mother? So if you are going to be the person that tells people everything you think they need to know, I'm just going to give you one word of advice. Stop.
She's telling the truth, y'all. That's right, Dave. She's telling the truth because I can't even think of a time. I'm like, hey, you know you can do this thing, right? Like, okay, cool, whatever. Didn't ask for your opinion.
There you go. There you go.
Oh my goodness. So where did all this wonderful confidence come from too? Was it from the role model of your mother and just all the times that you've really traveled the world and really gained this experience?
You know, then I will say this to the audience. I was the eldest, and everyone thinks birth order is important, but um, and it is a personal thing, but it has implication. Uh, at the age of 2.5, my brother came down. This is before there was the Salk vaccine. My brother contracted polio. So
Hmm.
I had to be the big sister. And throughout many years, because we went to the same grammar school, then we went to the same high school, and then we both went to the University of Illinois, is that when they say, "Are you your brother's keeper?" The answer is yeah. So watch out. But I sometimes had to advocate, stand up, speak up. And that has served me well because that's what I did when I was a teacher. I advocated and spoke up for the kids. Also, a lesson in Sunday school that I remember as if it were yesterday. Stand up and be counted. Speak up when you see wrongdoing. Maybe not necessarily to you, but you have to speak up if it's done to other people. And of course, if you've been the older sister of a sibling who wore a brace on his leg, you learn to do that. So, not to be Debbie Downer, but what I'm saying to people is you don't have to go through that to be an advocate. You don't have to go through that to speak up. I remembered this, not, sometimes you forget things if they happened 45 years ago. Well, some of you aren't 45 years, but that's all right. So I remember being on Bay Area Rapid Transit. I was taking the train maybe to downtown or over to Oakland. And I remember seeing two people a little inebriated. And I remember seeing the man get very rough with the woman. Now, mind you, again, I'm 4'11". I'm not assuming, but I was taught to speak up. And I remember getting seeing the BART security guy and saying, "You have to get on that train. There's a woman being abused." I didn't even remember I did that till last week. So sometimes we've done these wonderful things where we spoke up for other people and we don't remember we did them. But I would say that the confidence comes from I've been on the planet for a few years, decades. B, I was taught stand up and speak up. Also, we were taught to speak publicly, even in my grammar school, like you had to read your papers. So when I was a teacher in San Francisco, I had my students write their papers, and then for a third of the grade, they had to deliver them out loud. But let me tell you how mean of a teacher I was. I said, if I fall asleep while you're reading your paper, that's not on me, it's on you. But the other thing I did is I also said to the students and explained what audience behavior was. And I said, a third of your grade is on what you write. A third of your grade is how you present. And I taught them some public speaking skills. And I said, and a third of your grade is how you behave when other people are speaking. You better be listening. And if you're not listening, you better look like you're listening. I was a terror now that I think about it. So that's part of my backstory. Also, I came from teaching, so my responsibility was to stand up for the students, and I had to do that. I don't know if that's a long answer to a short question or a short answer to what should be a longer answer.
Don't worry, it was a great answer to a random question.
Good.
Because I was also going to be curious about that because I didn't take notes on that you're actually an English teacher in the past, and sometimes I jokingly say I get PTSD from English when I was in high school and used to get a bunch of red on my paper because it wasn't my strongest subject.
Well, you know what? This is what haunts me. I had a 7th grade teacher who made us do a diagramming sentences.
Oh
And
no. Ugh.
now I do listen to a lot of books. And if someone mispronounces something, my ears explode. Like part of being that grammar teacher, I was doing the English teacher, grammar teacher here in San Francisco to different classes. I'll never forget one of the teachers said, "I'm so glad you're teaching grammar because the students hate the English teachers. And I'm glad it's you and not me." Oh, thanks. But you know what? I love the language. I love when people can put thoughts and words together. And I love when people know the nuances of what words mean. And you know what? I've made up words. And then I learned there's a word for making up words, portmanteau, which sounds so elegant for something that I go, really? I got that. But I'll tell you a word I made up for my conversation book, and my editor loved it. She asked me to write a book on conversation. I said, really, there are 21 books on how to make conversation. And for those of you who want to write a book, I want you to hear what the wonderful editor, RoAne Davis, said to me when I said to her, "RoAne, why do you want me to write?" I'd already written How to Work Room. I'd already written The Secrets of Savvy Networking, her idea. I said, "Why do you want me to write a conversation book? There are 21 books on this subject." And she looked me in the eye, because she's only 5'1", and said, "Because none of the others have your voice." So I'm saying this to people. If someone says to you, "That's really interesting, you ought to think about writing that in a book," pay attention. The marketplace tells you what you ought to be doing. But I made up a word for the book and she loved it. And I thought that was great. We don't just want to be a sensational conversationalist. We want to be a conversensation. And I thought, I like that word. I also made up another word that's even more fun. One of my friends was telling me he bumped into a high school friend who was like screaming at him about all this organic food and people need to be vegetarians and blah. He said, "Susan, she scared me and the twins and she was so adamant." And I said to him, "Oh my goodness, you ran into a vigilante." That's what he did. So I love words. I love making up words. I love people who will engage in conversation. It's not that we necessarily have to agree, but I like this word. Be the person who illuminates. And what that means is you shed light. Now, I was just met with an old friend of mine. He was a juvenile. He wasn't my parole officer, but he was a juvenile parole officer. And he just told me something a friend of his said about landlords and tenants or whatever. And I thought, thank you for telling me. I never knew that. It's this concept that I forget who the guy was who made it up. He called it weak ties. There are people you have strong ties with. And you think the good things are going to happen from the people you're related to, you went to school with, and you're connected to. But sometimes that job lead, that recommendation referral comes from someone who knows someone who knows someone who knew your neighbor. the weak ties. And that's why we need to stay connected to as many people as possible. And that's why when something happens and we might be looking for a new job or a new client or a new apartment, we need to let people know, because this is the Susan RoAne method of networking and marketing. It's the #1 most effective strategy. And it goes like this, and it sounds like this. You never know. You think the people that you know, that the vice president here will get you a job. No, it could be your friend's grandmother who has a friend she plays, whatever they play, mahjong or bridge or poker with, that can get that information to someone. So one, for networking, you want to keep people in the loop. You want to share information with as many people, never putting pressure on them, because you don't make them feel they're incompetent, that they can't give you a lead. But the nice way to do it is to say, hey, I'm looking for this. If you know of anyone who might know someone, please think of me and let me know. This way you're informing them, you're asking them, and you're not putting pressure on them. For those of you that can't hear, Dom is nodding his head. I just want you to know we're you can't hear him do that, but I just heard you nod. I watched you nod your head.
Well, hey, it's like you're like a walking jewelry store with all these gems you're dropping, because hey, it's so true. Like a lot of and you're so true about the weak ties. It's even had slivers of it in my own life where it's like a person I haven't contacted or talked to as much. Like they've connected me with so many other wonderful people, and not just on the podcast, just with future business and speaking engagements. And it's just been a wonderful thing. So you're so right about that. And it's even more beautiful about the English as well. And so glad that you actually so much of a wordsmith that you made basically your own wonderful dictionary, and it might even expand with the vigilantes. And do you think that you may be making another wonderful dictionary of words in the future?
I made up so many words that I had to go to that notebook thing on my phone, and oh, I made up that word. Oh, I made up that word. Oh, I made up another word. For those of you that maybe like myself are not that good at being techies, I combined a word I heard growing up with the techno, and I now say to people, I'm so sorry that I couldn't do that. I'm a techno yutz. And what are people going to say? I can't believe you couldn't do it. They're going, oh, great word. I know someone that's worse than you. So yes, I made up that word too. But also, it also gives people a feel for that, you know, your own limitations, and that you're willing to learn a little bit more from them. Wait, what did someone just tell me this like a couple of hours ago? Oh, I know. A 2-year, no, like a 2-month-old great niece. The guy said, he looked at his watch and he said, I'm giving you 2 years, then you'll help me fix my iPhone. These kids do this in their sleep, that it takes me to hire someone for $150 an hour to help me. So every generation has their advantage. But what I'd like to do, Dom, I want to give people some tips about this idea of working a room. Let me define it for you. Working a room is about walking into any room, and it could be a Zoom, and connecting with people, having initial conversations, which might be on the Zoom, might be in the room, and starting the exchange upon which conversation and rapport is built. Nothing happens right then and there. It happens not overnight, and this is the RoAne version, it happens over time. So it's great. I went to this event and I met all these people. Oh, so what? If you got the cleaners in your pocket, as I wrote this in Secrets of Savvy Networking, that makes you a one-night stand. So what do you do when you meet people? And I'm going to give you the 3 traits. This is after your workroom, the 3 traits that will stand you out in terms of developing a network. Number 1, savvy networkers always acknowledge. They always give credit where credit is due. They say thank you. Oh, no, I know this might upset a lot of you. They actually send thank you notes. They know how to buy stamps. They have a good pen. They might have thank you note stationery. And they, even if they only write 2 sentences, they will thank someone for the lead, for the idea, for spending time listening to them. By the way, if someone doesn't give you a lead and doesn't give you a referral, but they listen to you, why do they need to be thanked? Because there are people that do that for $250 an hour, and they're doing that for free for you. Thank people who've given you time. So I'm a big believer that the savvy networkers always acknowledge. They never take credit for other people's work. They never take credit for other people's ideas. And those of us who are authors, and having had my 3 books, my first 3 books, all not just plagiarized, but my intellectual property was lifted. I have an attorney for that. The savvy people don't do that, because what would have solved it all is if each of these authors had actually done what I taught my students and used quotation marks and credited. That is such a way to get away with things. Okay, so that's the first thing. Acknowledge, acknowledge, acknowledge. Second trait is that savvy networkers, and this is so important, they stay in touch when they need nothing. You can, every one of our listeners can tell you the names of the people that are in touch with them when they need something. Do they ever call to say, how are you? No. We want to be the people that pick up the phone and say, I was just thinking about you. And maybe you don't pick up a phone. Maybe you send a text because you don't want to interfere with someone. Send a text, send an email. Maybe it's a DM. Maybe it's a Facebook instant message. Stay in touch with people. Everyone's going, well, of course, I'm a big Twitterer, so we're all having a little bit of a conniption fit. But that's a phrase my mother used. I think I'm going to bring that back into the verbiage. But we all are. But the truth is, that's how I learn things. If someone posts an article that's from the Baltimore Sun, and I don't get the Baltimore Sun, but it's an article I want to read, I'm so grateful. If someone leads me to an article in the Atlantic that I don't get, oh, isn't that great? If someone poses a thought, you know how much time I waste on Twitter? Because if no, this is true, because if Bette Midler writes something, I write her back. Really? I think Bette Midler wants to hear from me. Tell me if that's not procrastination. But definitely stay in touch with people when you don't need anything. Because some of us, when we need something, feel uncomfortable asking for help if we haven't been in touch. So the solution is just stay in touch with people when you need nothing. And then there's a third trait. And this is the best of all. And I'm going to quote Patricia Fripp, who is the most remarkable speech coach and speaker, because she said to me once, I may not be the most brilliant, but I'm the person with the best follow-up. There is nothing more irritating than me saying to someone, oh, you're right, that's a great idea. Let me give you the name of someone, blah, 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 and then nothing. They don't follow up. And then they come back, well, I want something else. Well, you didn't follow up with the last person. Be the person that has the best follow-up. And it's what my dad said in business. He was in Chicago. He said a lot of things, but this is the quotable one. Do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. I had a friend, one of my best friends from Chicago told me that he had a big fight with a girlfriend. Why? He said, well, she had to get off the phone. I said, we'll talk later. So he called her 2 weeks later and she was livid. He didn't understand. What are you livid about? I said I'd call later. And she said to him, you don't even understand what later means. Later means later that day, or by the worst, by tomorrow. And I go, oh, I did not understand that timeline. But seriously, do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. That's the 3 things about savvy networkers. But I'm going to give you the tip about walking into any room. Prepare before you walk in the room. Don't walk into a room cold. Who does that? By the way, before I walk into a room, I've spent so much time getting my face ready. Does it have the right color lipstick to match the outfit, etc.? You know, we need to pay as much attention to the preparation for being in that room with people as we do for walking in the room. Is my tie straight? Am I wearing a good collared shirt? Oh, is this flattering? Oh, did I have today's remnants of lunch on it when tonight's a big event? And here's what you prepare. You prepare your own self-introduction. You cannot rely on Dom introducing you, though that would be very nice, Dom. I just want you to know, every time you walk into a room, you have to rely on yourself. So this is the self-introduction. When people say, oh, I prepared my elevator pitch. Well, pitch it, because nobody wants to hear 30 seconds to a minute about you when they've got a beverage in one hand and an hors d'oeuvre in the other. So it's this 3 traits of the RoAne self-introduction. 1, it's 7 to 9 seconds. Why? Because that's a pleasantry. But why is it only that? Well, one day I decided, why don't I go and reread my book to see if I learned anything from it? And I realized why. I quoted the gentleman who wrote about eye contact. And what he said is, after 9 seconds, eye contact is perceived as a glare. So 7 to 9 seconds, then you have to look away or look down, but you don't want people to think you're glaring at them, unless you're the 6th grade teacher. Then you want the kids to think you're glaring at them. And I perfected that. The second trait is that you link your self-introduction to whatever Zoom or room you're in. And the reason is you need to give people an idea of the context of why you're there. Is it a fundraiser for the Leukemia Society? Is it a great niece's first birthday party? Is it your professional association's awards banquet? Give people a reason so that they know why you're there, so that will help them talk to you. So that's why we link it to that particular event. And then the 3rd trait of a self-introduction, and this again came from Patricia, is don't give people your title. Because titles vary for different companies. At one company, a vice president is like they have 42,000 of them, it means nothing. At another company, the director might have more import than. So don't give your title, she said, give the benefit of what you do. You're in real estate. I put a roof over your head. The best one was the guy that he was in the coffee shop when I was writing What Do I Say Next? And one day the power went out. It's Northern California. Our power goes out. And even they couldn't even grind the coffee for the machines, which was kind of interesting. And we started to talk, and he saw I was there every day writing on paper. You could tell I was writing a book, but I asked him what he did. And I swear to you, he looked at me totally deadpan. That was it. He looked at me totally deadpan, no smile, and said, Susan, I help rich people sleep at night.
Oh.
Okay, so I said to him, oh, you're a pharmacist. And he said, I'm a financial planner.
Mm.
So I'm thinking he's drugging people so they could sleep at night. And he's got, no, we're helping them with their, and to me, that was just so perfect. He cracked me up, but let me tell you what else he did. He gave me such an interesting self-introduction that he gave me the permission to ask him the question. Therefore, he actually started the conversation, but he let me think I did. So when you give people the benefit of what you do, you give them the material to start the conversation. Now I'm going to switch gears and say, folks, if you meet someone who says something like that to you, it's a gift. Be sure to ask the question. Be sure to share a story or an insight. It's like when, may she rest in peace, Secretary Madeleine Albright. And I wrote about her in my book. She always wore a brooch, a pin on her left-hand side. And if you heard her say, if she knew that already you were a snake, she wore her snake pin. If she really liked you, she might have worn, she had, and her pins were on display, and she wrote a book about her pins. And I once heard her on, well, back in the day with Jon Stewart on The Daily Show, where she said some of the people that she met with, especially the men, had never met with a woman diplomat. They didn't know what to say, but she gave them an object that they could remark about and feel they started the conversation. It's the old Bonnie Raitt song, let's give them something to talk about. A pin, a tie. I have one sweatshirt I love. It says, give me chocolate and nobody gets hurt. And that starts conversation. So really help people make conversation with you. And then when they give you that gift, that funny tie that has Tony the Tiger on it, or that pin, use it to speak to them.
That's right. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's the Media Maven right there, indeed, baby. That's right. Gem after gem. It's like a bunch of tennis bracelets all on one row, y'all, with all these wonderful gems, indeed. Especially with the follow-up piece, too. And, of course, the acknowledgement, too. Just so many things. Can't even write it down. It's one of those things you have to really practice over and over again. And you even really displayed it well, especially the acknowledge piece. Always giving credit to Patricia Fripp for her awesome knowledge indeed.
I had this happen. I was giving a speech, and there is someone who wrote in 1980 Success Magazine, the original Success Magazine, Dr. Adele Sheely wrote that what we do in these situations, whether it's professional or personal, is that instead of acting like the guest in every room, and this is a tip I want to give to all of our listeners, act like the host. And then she talked about what do hosts do. You know what hosts do. They make you feel comfortable. They introduce you around. They start conversations. And then they listen to your answer when they've asked a question. And I still quote Dr. Adele Sheely. And about 10 years ago, an old pal of mine heard me speak again. And he came up to me and he said, I heard you speak 15 years ago. You quoted Dr. Sheely. It's 15 years later. He said, Susan, you didn't take credit for that. You still quoted her. So you can never go wrong. Nobody will think that you don't know what you're talking about. They'll think you're well-read and did your research. So thank you for noticing that, Tom.
Well, of course, definitely. Definitely indeed, because integrity is a huge thing nowadays, and it's really a core value that a lot of folks probably have to readopt in this social media age that we're in, where folks want to post pictures of them next to Lamborghinis and say they're doing it big when they're still living paycheck to paycheck, giving folks mirages.
Yeah, I think it's we don't tell people the bad things. Like, what did I do? I know I've done that. I've said some things about myself on Facebook, and it comes out kind of funny, but we can't know it all. Um, I will often say, if I post a picture of food, I go, "Yeah, in a million years, I could never and would never cook anything like this." You have to take yourself a little more lightly. And I too find the people that everything is about them and how many speeches they gave. There are a couple of guys on Facebook and LinkedIn that have on their, I don't know how they do it, counters to how much money they made while they were asleep from passive income. Now, it may be an age thing and it may be how we were raised. I find that horrifying. If you're making that much money, because the people who really have a lot of money, they don't talk about it.
Hmm.
And all it does is it makes other people feel bad. I'm not going to buy your podcast in a box just because you have a meter clicking off how much money you make. I don't mean you, but I'm talking about these guys who do this. So that goes back to how to work a room and how to build relationships. This isn't how you build a relationship, by letting someone know exactly how much you have, because then you'll come up against a Susan RoAne who will say, the people that have it don't talk about it. It reminds me of the people who say, where I live in Marin County, I'm so spiritual. Really? Then why did you open up your car door, bang my car, and try to drive away? By the way, that actually happened to me. But I went Chicago on her. I jumped out of the car and said to her, you are not moving till we see what damage you did. I scared her. But she was in a big SUV. She could have just run me over. That would have been the other thing. But don't tell me you're spiritual, because the really spiritual people don't tell you that. Don't tell me you're rich, because the rich people don't talk about it. And please don't tell me you're smart, because smart people don't tell you that. Do I sound negative? I'm just telling it like it is and keeping it 100, Dom.
That's right, indeed. She's probably keeping it 150 indeed, because my goodness, you don't get to the point where Susan is right now, because she has done so much and she's going to be doing a whole lot more in the future. So, a question I've been loving to ask folks, especially those with a lot of wisdom in business, and that is, what would you consider probably one of your biggest failures that actually ended up becoming one of your biggest victories?
Oh, that's an interesting biggest failure. I'll tell you, the biggest failure was not in the business. And though, by the way, being in my own business for a couple decades, if I had to do it over again, I would have taken accounting for entrepreneurs, because I'm the English history major. Oh my God, you mean there are numbers in this world? So yeah, that's that. If I had to do it over again, I'd learn a little bit more. But you know what my biggest failure was, and I turned it into a big victory? When I started in my career as a teacher in Chicago, you only had to have a pulse rate or an IQ of 50 combined, because they needed bodies. I'm sorry, that's not exactly true, but from University of Illinois. And I thought I should copy the teacher next door, because I had an actual degree. I didn't have teaching credentials. I got them at the same time at night school. And I copied the teacher next door, and I did not have good control, good discipline. I didn't. And then one day, and it was literally about 3 months into the semester, one of the students, and I remember his name as if it were yesterday, said to me, "Ms. R, please don't let her in the room. We don't like her." And I thought they did because she had been at the summer school and knew them. I said, "What? I thought you all adored," she was formerly a nun's sister or whatever. "No, please." She would do guilt trips on them. And I said, "Okay." So I locked my door from the inside. And that's when I realized I can't be the teacher next door. And it was that young man, Gary Reed, who made me realize I had to be me, which meant I had to own my own sense of humor, own how I did things. And what happened from that day, when all the other classes by early spring were falling apart in Chicago, my class and I, my 6th grade class and I, just bonded to the point that the vice principal said to me, "What did you do? Your class is like the model class." And it was owning who I was, and for better or for worse, I don't know, but I remember saying to the kids, "I'm gonna have to take this test, and they're gonna be doing it all over Chicago, and I'm gonna get paid whether I teach you or not, but I'm gonna let you vote. You're not voting today. I want you to think about it, and we're gonna vote tomorrow. Do you want me to teach you, or do you want me to just sit here? Because it doesn't matter. I'll get paid either way." And they came the next day and they voted that they wanted to learn. And that I gave them the choice. They wanted to learn how to take a test. Okay, so I'm revealing something that, thank goodness, this was a long time ago. I said, I have access to get a test. I can teach you how to take a test, because I was a lousy test taker. So I understood not being a good test taker. And they wanted to learn. And that changed everything. And it was a big failure on my part that I wasn't me to begin with and didn't even know how to do it. But it took one of my students to lead me to that path.
Don't just love children. They don't have filters.
They have no filters whatsoever. But I ended up loving these kids. If I had one thing that I really could have happen to me, and I also kind of envisioned it, because Oprah at the time was from Chicago, and my book had come out and had been around in Chicago. I had this fantasy that they were going to find all my 6th grade students and do like, what's that? This Is Your Life. And I'd come out and there would be the kids whose names I still remember. I don't know where they are, how they are, etc. I would love to see them because they taught me down. They grew me up.
Alrighty. If for some strange reason one of them's listening right now, reach out to Susan. Just saying.
Yes, please, Gary, Doris. My here's this is what I did to one of the students. So we had a little party the second to the last day, and he brought sweet potato pie. And he was the nicest kid, and he was a really studious student. And so I said to him, "I really want that recipe." "Well, my mom's busy." I said, "Did you want to go to 7th grade?" He was going to go to 7th grade anyway. The next day he came in and the recipe was written out by his mother on a recipe card that I still have. The best sweet potato pie recipe. It was the first time I had sweet potato pie, and I realized how much I loved it, but I scared him. You can get away with a lot if you're 4'11", by the way, Dom. And you see just what I did. I want our audience I brought who I am and who I was into this conversation. because we connect with people. Maybe you remember your terrorizing sixth grade teacher and you might hate me, but you might still like me. Or maybe you know someone and visited Chicago and you did have deep dish pizza. Or maybe you came to San Francisco and bring enough of what you have to say about yourself and parts of you so that people can connect with whichever part that fits them in their narrative and their backstory.
Boom. She's like a walking book of Proverbs, y'all. Well, since you brought up that great point, fun question we're loving to ask guests, and that is, if your wonderful book, How to Work a Room, if it was a food, what would it be and why?
Well, it would either be deep dish pizza, or it would be, now this is probably some of you are going, oh my God. Or it would be a Vienna hot dog with the works, because we're the hot dog people. Or it would be dark chocolate with sea salt.
Ah,
Oh, and I'll tell you what else, for anyone that's ever going to come to San Francisco, or it would be a hot fudge sundae at Ghirardelli Square with extra whipped cream.
ooh, all right. Ah, the list just keeps getting better and better. It's all for y'all.
Oh, by the way, I forgot to say, with all the calories taken out, like the gluten-free.
That's true, because the book's not 1,000 pages. It's calorie free.
Yeah, that's right. I should write that on the cover. No, the biggest fad in the world is when you go to buy licorice and it says gluten-free and you go like, of course it is. What do you need to write that for? That's why we have to have a sense of humor about everything, including our own eating habits.
Amen to that. You can see that because it's so darn true. It's like, oh wow, like, hey, 100% real juice made from concentrate. Oh, okay.
That's right. Some of it is like, and by the way, don't be afraid when you see something that looks so bizarrely ridiculous and so ironic. Share that with people, because if you see it and it's fun to you, it'll be fun to other people, unless they're the people selling it. Because what we want to do, and you'll notice this, Dom and I have laughed together. The people you're going to have long-term relationships with for business and personal will be people that you can share a laugh.
Woohoo! That's what I'm talking about, because she's right indeed, folks. That's right indeed. Especially when folks wear their belts too tight these days, metaphorically speaking. Even though some folks probably don't even wear belts. They need laughs, y'all.
There you go.
Oh, man. Well, two more questions and I'll let you make a run for it. So, since you've been on a boatload of interviews, probably 3,000 at this point, and you've been asked a million questions, but is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often when you're on the guest side of the game on these interviews?
I do like what you asked me. What did I fail at that I turned around? But I also think the other one is, and I think I did allude to it, what would I have done differently in this journey? Because, yeah, I did say I would have taken a math class or an accounting class. But I think there are a lot of people that, well, I was a success. Or there are some people that said, oh, I did all these horrible things and then I saw the light and now I'm a success. And I once had a speaker friend said, why do we extol the virtue of someone who's really done some terrible things? Why aren't we saying that that nice average person that mows their lawn, that drives their kids to school, that takes care of their parents, that volunteers at the soup kitchen, why aren't we really rising up that person who has never done anything horribly bad, but what we do is we want to listen to the speaker, I did this and then that. You know what? I think we should appreciate the people who have always been what I call the good citizens. Oh, by the way, when I was a teacher, we used to give kids citizenship grades. But when I was a student, we would get these report cards, and some of you probably remember this, that if you talked too much in class, you got a red check where it said keeps profitably busy. I always got red checks. I could not keep profitably busy.
Well, hey, you get paid to do it now.
You. That's I dedicated my third book, my conversation book, to my first grade teacher, who told my mother, and I still remember this, I'd love to double promote Susan, but I can't because she finishes her work, but she doesn't sit in her seat. She walks around and talks to other people, all the other kids. And I wrote in like a kid's handwriting, Dear Miss Kelly, I dedicate this book to you because I still get up out of my seat and talk to other people. And by the way, I liked second grade anyway. And it goes to this, and I want to say this to everyone listening. If you have a goal, if you have something that you do that you know you're good at, don't let anyone rain on your parade. I once had a young man when I was speaking at a big mall in San Jose, like 3 stories and projecting. Afterwards, he asked me a question. He said, well, what if you do all the things and strategies that you do? You have your self-introduction, you introduce yourself to people, you make conversation, you follow up with them. He said, well, what do you do if your friends make fun of you for doing this? And I had to think about it. And I said something to him that I've repeated, and I'll repeat it again. I would say get new friends. But what I said to him was, if you trade off on something that you're good at and you're proud of, because other people aren't good at it, you will have lost this wonderful trait, and they still will never be as good at it as you are. So own it and be it. If you can converse with people, and I'd like to say, be sure to talk to strangers. If I didn't talk to strangers, I'd still be waiting for that bus in Barcelona. So talk to people, smile at people. And if you're not sure where you can practice, if you go to the grocery store, talk to people there, talk to people in the line at the movie. Well, I don't know, someday we'll go back and being in line at movies. You just don't know. If we get practice in our conversation with people we don't know, we'll feel more confident when we walk into rooms and Zooms. And if you're on a Zoom, use the chat box. If you see someone who's interesting, send them a note. I know people use the chat box and they'll put their LinkedIn thing in there. I'm not going to go track you down on LinkedIn. Give me something else that I can get you directly, that I don't have to sign on to this to do this. Make it easy for people to talk to you, do business with you, give you leads.
Oh, that's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Solid advice, indeed. That's right, indeed. Don't let anybody dull that sparkle, y'all. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Get new friends if you need to get new friends. Just because they're jealous don't mean you need to join them and be a crab in a barrel with the rest of them.
You can tell folks he's from Baltimore. That's because they turn those crabs into crab cakes.
That's right, indeed.
Which are delicious, you know.
Oh, yes, indeed. That's right, especially some soft shell crab goodness. That's right, indeed. Well, we're coming down to the magical question before we make any more food references, which is probably one of the traits of this podcast. And that is, if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but you're now in 2022 with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Well, the advice I'd give to myself if I was 25, is something that I learned from my aunt when she turned 65, because now I know it to be true. Because I said to her, she was staying with me, and I said to her, Auntie Mills, 65, tell me what's different at 65. And she thought about it and thought about it. And I've actually quoted her in at least 2 books. I plagiarized myself. And she said something that I would say to all of you. She said, at 65, you know what's worth your worry. And I think at 25, don't spend all your money. Don't live over your limit. Go for that new job. Take that new training. But just because you have the money doesn't mean you have to impress friends with the jewelry and the house and the whatever, the stuff. But also, don't worry about things that seem big at the time. And I think it would be remiss if I didn't say, right now, I think about some things that I go, oh, that's so terrible. And then I think, wait a minute, I'm living here. I'm not in Ukraine. I'm not watching that happen, which is heartbreaking. And there's so many heartbreaking things here that are happening. And I think, oh, perhaps the fact that my nail polish chipped is not that important. So I think we want, and maybe this is the word, if I could say anything to my 25-year-old self, would be perspective. Perspective. And my 25-year-old self, I'd also say, by the way, you can't eat all those French fries and not gain weight. That's the other thing I would say. But I would also say, develop good health habits. Take good care. Make sure that by 35, you don't have high blood pressure. Take walks. And I would not say, oh, I think you should go rappelling from Mount Kilimanjaro. That is not what I would be doing. Also, I would say this. Well, I just gave myself an idea. You may want to know what's worth your worry, but here's another thing I've learned from people who talk about their success. Successful people don't take foolish risks. They calculate, they analyze, they make sure that the risk they're taking has some backing to it. I just listened to someone who said, it's not those who take a risk for risk's sake, it's you take a risk that you've analyzed. And about career change. So I stayed in teaching, which I never wanted to be in. And I really quite loved it. And then San Francisco laid off 1,200 teachers, and I was one of them. And what I did is I followed my instinct, because people were calling me and saying, oh, what am I going to do? They're laying off teachers. And I tell them. And then I realized, oh, that's not the way you do it. You have to let people figure out their skills and where they want to use it. And I designed a career change workshop for teachers. And I thought I'd go and get a job afterwards, but this ended up being speaker, whatever, this trajectory. So I think when it comes down to it, look at what you're doing. Don't quit for quitting's sake or because all your friends are. Analyze things like how much your rent is, etc. I think we have to make prudent choices. And if you're not sure, have that network. Talk to your parents, talk to some wise friends, talk to some of your colleagues, talk to people who you think have made good choices, and just run it by them.
Oh, that's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. A jewel rampage, y'all. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Wise advice today, especially from the wonderful auntie. Know it's worth your worry.
Oh, isn't that brilliant? And now that I'm older, I now can see that just some things that in perspective weren't worth the worry. We turn ourselves inside out for things that never happened, but some things are worth the worry, and those are the things we should focus on.
That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Especially when it involves focusing on inviting Susan to your wonderful virtual event to speak and buy some books and share with your friends and family. So, for those who want to keep in touch with the wonderful, sensational, scintillating Susan, what's the best way for folks to do so?
Well, I'm old school. Please don't go to LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. Oh my God, no wonder I can't follow my messages. Here's some email. I check that. It pops up all the time. It's Susan@SusanRoAne.com, and I'll spell it for you. SUSAN@SUSANROANE.com. Email me. Also, if you really want the gems and my unvarnished opinions, follow me on Twitter @SusanRoAne or @How to Work a Room. I'm a little more businesslike and How to Work a Room. I think I'm a little more fun on Susan RoAne, but do both. But follow me there. You've got my email. And if there is something that you heard or something that comes up that we didn't address and you've got a burning question, put the word listened to Dom burning question in the subject line, and I promise I will get back to you.
Oh, and you can bank on it indeed, y'all. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right. So follow Susan on Twitter, especially, and shoot her a wonderful email. That's right. Send her one of those love notes like, hey, I sponsored Amazon to send you some wonderful salted dark chocolate. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed.
I don't want crab cakes.
Oh, there we go. So there you go. And she won't be crabby either. She'll be excited.
There you go. You don't have to give me anything. What you've done is you've given me an opportunity to share my strategies, to have a fun evening, and to speak to your people. And if there's any way that I can spread some of that scintillating Susan, I love that one. I will be quoting you. That's a gift to me.
Woohoo! Well, sounds good indeed. Who needs to wait until Christmas? So, any other parting thoughts before we close up shop, Susan?
Parting thoughts, talk to strangers. And I'm going to give you one parting thought. In any room you are in, talk to the people standing alone anywhere, because they are less comfortable than you. They haven't been RoAneized. And it could be the best strategy to just talk to the people standing alone. But I'll tell you what it really is. It's a kind thing to do. And we want to be known for our kindness.
Thanks a bunch for tuning in and setting aside some of your time to listen to this wonderful podcast, Going North. If you really enjoyed what you heard, do me a solid and share this with your network and someone that you care about that would get something out of it too. And be sure to subscribe to hear more, and heck, even check out the backlog if you would like, because there are hundreds of episodes to choose from, and they just keep getting better and not butter.